Holly Bobo. On the morning of April 13, 2011, a 20-year-old nursing student was seen being led into the woods behind her family's home in Darden, Tennessee, by a man dressed head to toe in camouflage. Her brother Clint, still half asleep, initially mistook the man for Holly's boyfriend. Their mother Karen called the house and told Clint, "That is not Drew. Get a gun and shoot him." But Clint still believed it was Drew. By the time he looked again, Holly and the man had disappeared into the tree line. Clint found 50 to 60 blood drops in the carport and dialed 911. Police arrived 10 minutes later, launching what the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation later called the most exhaustive and expensive investigation in the agency's history. Holly Lynn Bobo was a student at the University of Tennessee at Martin, living with her family in an unincorporated community in Decatur County, about 100 miles southwest of Nashville. Friends described her as shy, sweet, deeply religious, and driven by a passion for nursing. Her cousin was country singer Whitney Duncan. She was 20 years old and had woken up at 4:30 that morning to study for an exam. Both parents had left for work by 7:30. Neighbor James Barnes had heard Holly screaming, "Stop! I said stop!" The massive search recovered Holly's personal items scattered across the area, her lunchbox in a creek, her cell phone about 5 miles from home, and a SIM card found separately. Investigators initially focused on a registered offender named Terry Britt, who matched the witness description. Clint identified Britt's voice as very similar to what he heard. Despite this, Britt was never charged. The break came in March of 2014 when John Dylan Adams, younger brother of the primary suspect, was arrested on federal gun charges. Prosecutors arranged a deal placing Dylan with a retired Memphis police officer hired by the Bobo family. 5 weeks later, Dylan reportedly wanted to confess. He described arriving at his brother Zachary's home and seeing Holly sitting in a chair while Jason Wayne Autry stood nearby. Zachary Adams was charged with kidnapping and taking Holly's life on March 5, 2014. In September of 2014, ginseng hunters found Holly's partial remains in a wooded area of northern Decatur County near Interstate 40, almost 20 miles from home. Under a bucket in the woods lay a skull with a bullet hole in the back, along with teeth matching dental records, ribs, and a shoulder blade. What happens when the entire case rests on the testimony of a 16-time convicted felon who later says he made the whole thing up? Zachary Adams' trial began September 11, 2017. The prosecution's star witness was Jason Autry, a convicted felon and gang member who testified for 9.5 hours. Autry claimed he arrived at a property and found Holly's body in Adams' truck. When they attempted to move her near the Tennessee River, her foot moved. She was still alive. Adams allegedly grabbed a gun and shot her. The defense argued Autry fabricated everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. Critically, no DNA or forensic evidence ever linked any defendant to Holly or to the site where her remains were found. The jury found Adams guilty. He was sentenced to life without parole plus 50 years. John Dylan Adams entered an Alford plea and received 35 years. Autry pleaded guilty to lesser charges and received 8 years, released in September of 2020. Then, in December of 2023, Autry recanted his entire testimony to a forensic neuropsychologist, stating he concocted the entire story in his jail cell while reviewing discovery evidence. In prison video obtained by WSMV, Autry said, "That is the worst I ever felt in my life, knowing that you just lied and put an innocent man in prison." A post-conviction relief hearing stretched through 2025. with Adams testifying for the first time on November 20th, denying any involvement. As of March 2026, no ruling has been issued. A decision on whether Adams receives a new trial is imminent. That case may have sent an innocent man to prison based on fabricated testimony. But the next one would involve a body that has never been found, a rolled-up rug, and a husband who fled to Mexico with the children. Janet March. On August 15, 1996, a 33-year-old Nashville artist disappeared from her home. Her husband, Perry March, claimed she announced she was leaving on a 12-day vacation, packed bags, took her passport and $1,500 in cash, left a typed to-do list, and drove away in her Volvo around 8:30 that evening. The next morning, the cleaning lady found the house already clean. More disturbingly, their 5-year-old son was seen bouncing on a rolled-up oriental rug on the floor. Police later theorized the rug concealed Janet's body. Janet Gail Levine March was the daughter of Nashville attorney Lawrence Levine, a passionate painter who illustrated children's books and designed a prototype collapsible baby chair. She married Perry Avram March on June 14, 1987, after meeting him at the University of Michigan. Together they had 2 children. Perry graduated from Vanderbilt Law School and joined a prestigious men's firm, but was forced to resign in 1991 after being caught sending anonymous, inappropriate letters to a paralegal. The marriage deteriorated through the mid-90s. Janet had a divorce book on her nightstand and an appointment with a divorce lawyer scheduled for August 16th, the day after she vanished. Perry persuaded Janet's parents, the Levines, to wait 2 full weeks before reporting her missing. During those weeks, he bought unnecessary new tires for his Jeep, despite the existing ones being in excellent condition, began seeking a criminal defense attorney, and exclaimed at their son's birthday party, "That woman has ruined my life." Janet's abandoned Volvo was found September 7th at an apartment complex 5 miles from home, covered in dust and cobwebs, with her purse, passport, credit cards, and $11 inside, but no personal essentials in the packed suitcase. When police sought the family computer, Perry's hard drive had been forcibly removed and destroyed. His father, Arthur, later admitted disposing of it at Perry's request. Why would a man who claims his wife left voluntarily destroy his own hard drive and buy new tires he does not need in the weeks after her disappearance? In late 1999, Perry fled the country with the children, taking them to his father Arthur's home in Ajijic, Mexico, a lakeside expat community where he opened a restaurant and attempted to build a new life under the assumption that distance and international borders would keep Nashville's investigators at bay. A dramatic custody battle ensued that stretched across 2 countries and multiple courts. The Levines, Janet's parents, eventually obtained a Mexican court order granting them custody. In a scene that played out like a thriller, they arrived at the Mexican school where the children were enrolled. While Perry was detained by Mexican authorities for visa violations, the Levines grabbed the children and raced toward the airport. Arthur March pursued them in a car, trying to intercept. The Levines made the flight. The children returned to Nashville. A federal court initially ordered the children sent back to Perry, but the ruling was contested, and in August of 2005, Perry was arrested at his Mexican restaurant by Mexican authorities, working with American investigators, and extradited back to Nashville to face charges. On his first night in Davidson County Jail, Perry approached inmate Russell Nathaniel Ferris and offered to post his bond in exchange for eliminating the Levines. Ferris informed his attorney. Police recorded subsequent conversations. Perry told Ferris, "I cannot tell you how excited I am." 5 recorded calls between Ferris and Arthur March revealed Arthur providing instructions on timing, weapons, surgical gloves, and escape routes. Perry's trial in August of 2006 relied on overwhelming circumstantial evidence. The suspicious typed list, the rolled-up rug, the destroyed hard drive, the unnecessary tire purchase, and Arthur March's videotaped testimony that Perry confessed to striking Janet with a wrench. Arthur described helping move remains in a leaf bag to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where he buried them along Interstate 65, but he could not relocate the spot. On August 17th, the jury found Perry guilty. His combined sentence, 56 years. Arthur passed away in federal prison on December 21st, 2006, at age 78. Perry March remains incarcerated at Morgan County Correctional Complex in Wartburg, Tennessee. Janet's body has never been found. The children, now adults in their 30s, were raised by their maternal grandparents. Perry's parole eligibility is estimated between 2035 and 2040. That case produced a conviction without a body. But the next one would involve 2 shots fired through a bedroom wall while a teenager slept, and 2 friends who wired themselves to catch the person responsible. Emma Walker. On November 21st, 2016, between midnight and 1 in the morning, 2 shots were fired through the exterior wall of a bedroom at a home in Knoxville, Tennessee. The person inside was asleep. 1 round struck her behind her left ear. The other lodged in her pillow. Her mother, Jill, discovered her at approximately 6 that morning. The initial call to emergency services reported a possible self-inflicted incident. But forensic technicians found bullet holes in the bedroom wall and 2 shell casings outside in the yard. Emma Jane Walker was a junior at Central High School, a cheerleader, honor student, and National Beta Club member who dreamed of becoming a neonatal nurse. Her mother described her as friends with everybody who marched to her own drum. She was 16 years old. William Riley Gall, 18, was a wide receiver on the Central High football team who had graduated and enrolled at Maryville College. Their relationship began when Emma was a freshman and quickly turned controlling. Gall dictated what she wore, who she spoke to, and isolated her from friends and family. He monitored her social media and reacted with hostility when she interacted with anyone outside his approved circle. The relationship followed a classic pattern of escalation. Early charm, followed by possessiveness, followed by emotional manipulation designed to make Emma feel responsible for his well-being. He once ingested medication with alcohol after a breakup in what appeared to be a manipulation tactic aimed at pulling Emma back in through guilt and fear. By October of 2016, Emma's parents had recognized the danger clearly enough to ban all contact. She told friends she was done for good. He did not accept it. He could not tolerate the idea that she had moved on, and the weeks that followed would prove how far he was willing to go to make sure she could not. In the days before, Gall orchestrated a series of staged incidents. On November 18th, he faked a kidnapping, calling Emma screaming that 2 men had thrown him in a van, then appearing lying in a ditch. The same day, he stole a 9mm firearm from his grandfather's vehicle. On November 19th, a figure dressed entirely in black appeared at Emma's home, repeatedly ringing the doorbell. Emma texted friends that she was scared and thought she was going to die. Prosecutors later argued Gall created both events to generate alternate suspects for what he was already planning. Before leaving his dormitory that night, he called a friend to ask how to remove fingerprints from a firearm. He drove 25 miles to the Walker home and fired through the wall. What would have happened if two of his friends had not decided to take matters into their own hands the very next day. Every person detectives spoke to in the hours after Emma's passing named Riley Gall as someone they suspected. His grief did not ring true to anyone who knew the situation. His friend Alex McCarty told investigators Gall had stolen his grandfather's firearm and had been behaving erratically in the days leading up to the incident. On November 22nd, just one day after Emma was found, McCarty and Noah Walton approached police voluntarily and offered to help recover what they believed was the weapon. They did not wait to be asked. They walked into the station on their own. Detectives equipped them with microphones and a hidden camera concealed in a key fob. During the recorded meeting, Gall proposed disposing of the weapon in the Tennessee River. They stopped at his stepfather's house, where Gall retrieved a trash bag containing the firearm along with gloves, black tape, black clothing, and shoes matching the figure in black. Officers arrested Gall approximately 1 minute after McCarty saw the weapon. Between the incident and his arrest, Gall had posted on social media, "That is my beautiful Emma. Rest easy now, sweetheart," posing as a grieving ex-boyfriend at her vigil. On May 8, 2018, the jury found Gall guilty of first-degree premeditated taking. He was sentenced to life with parole eligibility after 51 years, approximately 2069. The Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld his conviction in February of 2023. Emma Walker Day is observed annually in Knox County. A NICU room at East Tennessee Children's Hospital was dedicated in her honor. That case was cracked by 2 teenagers wearing wires. But the next one involves a level of cruelty that tested the limits of what a courtroom could bear. A corrupt judge consuming 30 painkillers a day, and a legal saga that has lasted 18 years. Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. On the night of January 6, 2007, a young couple was abducted from a parking lot in Knoxville, Tennessee. What followed over approximately 36 hours constitutes one of the most extreme acts of cruelty in the state's criminal history. Both were held, harmed in ways that are difficult to describe, and taken from the world in separate locations by multiple attackers. The details presented at trial were so severe that several jurors required counseling afterward. Channon Gale Christian was a 21-year-old University of Tennessee sociology senior. Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr., 23, was a former standout baseball player working as a carpenter. They had been dating for about 2 months when they were taken at gunpoint from the Washington Ridge Apartments parking lot by 3 men, Lamarcus Davidson, Latalvis Cobbins, and Eric Boyd. The couple was forced into the back seat of Christian's Toyota with their hands bound and driven to Davidson's rental house on Chipman Street in North Knoxville. Christopher Newsom was harmed, gagged, and led barefoot to nearby railroad tracks, where he was shot 3 times, the fatal shot fired with the muzzle pressed to his head. His body was wrapped in a comforter, doused in gasoline, and set on fire. A railroad employee discovered him around 12:20 the next afternoon. Channon Christian was held captive for hours, beaten, and subjected to prolonged harm by multiple attackers. Forensic evidence confirmed the involvement of both Davidson and Cobbins. A chemical was poured down her throat and her body scrubbed in an attempt to destroy biological evidence. The attempt to clean the evidence showed awareness. They knew what they were doing. They knew what DNA could prove. While still alive, she was bound in a hog-tied position, her face covered with a trash bag, and placed inside a residential trash container in the kitchen. She slowly suffocated inside it. The medical examiner determined she was alive when she was placed in the container. She did not pass quickly. She was conscious and aware. Afterward, Davidson's girlfriend, Vanessa Coleman, wrote in her journal, "Let us talk about adventures. I had one hell of an adventure since I have been in the big TN." She wrote the word adventure to describe what had happened to two people inside the house where she was staying. How does a woman write the word adventure in her journal to describe what happened to Chan and Christian, and then go on with her day as if nothing occurred? Fingerprints on an envelope in Christian's vehicle led directly to Davidson, and all 5 suspects were arrested by January 12th, just 6 days after the abduction. 4 state-level trials were held in 2009 and 2010 before Judge Richard Baumgartner, yielding convictions for all defendants. The trials appeared to be moving the case toward closure. Then came the bombshell that would extend the family's nightmare by years. In early 2011, it emerged that Baumgartner was addicted to prescription painkillers, consuming up to 30 pills per day during the very trials he was presiding over. The pills were obtained from convicts he himself had sentenced. His supplier regularly provided him with medication and personal favors, sometimes during court breaks in his own chambers. Baumgartner pleaded guilty to official misconduct and resigned. The scandal necessitated retrials for several defendants, meaning the families had to sit through the details again and again and again. The judge who was supposed to deliver justice had been incapacitated throughout the entire process. After years of proceedings, the sentences settled. Davidson received death, plus 80 years. He appeared in Knox County Court in June of 2025, challenging his sentence. No execution date has been set. Cobbins received life without parole. George Thomas accepted a plea deal of 50 years in exchange for testifying against Eric Boyd. Boyd received 2 consecutive life sentences plus 90 years. Coleman received 35 years. The Christian and Newsom families have appeared in court over 350 times across 18 years. 2 laws were passed in the victims' names. The Chris Newsom Act eliminated the requirement for a judge's signature on unanimous jury verdicts, and the Chan and Christian Act prevented attorneys from introducing evidence about a victim's past behavior. The Chipman Street house was demolished in October of 2008. That case exposed a judge who was incapacitated throughout 4 major trials. But the next one would involve a skull fragment kept as a souvenir and the youngest woman sentenced to death in the modern era. Colleen Slemmer. On the evening of January 12, 1995, a 19-year-old Job Corps student in Knoxville, Tennessee, was lured to an abandoned steam plant near the University of Tennessee campus under the pretense of smoking and making peace with a classmate who had been hostile toward her. What happened over the next 30 minutes to an hour was so extreme that the groundskeeper who discovered the body the next morning initially mistook it for an animal's remains. Colleen Slemmer was from Orange Park, Florida, a marathon runner, roller skater, and self-described computer enthusiast. Unable to afford college, she enrolled at the Job Corps Center in Knoxville in September of 1994 to study computer technology. She had been there about 3 months. She was 19 years old and trying to build a path forward with limited resources. Krista Gale Pike, born March 10, 1976, had one of the most troubled childhoods on record. As an infant, she was found crawling through waste. Her parents divorced twice. Her mother attempted to end her own life. Pike herself attempted the same in 3rd grade. After her grandmother passed away in 1988, Pike attempted again at 12. She earned her GED in a juvenile facility and enrolled at Job Corps, where she began dating Tatterell Ship, 17, and the two developed a fixation with dark rituals. Pike referred to herself as Lil Devil. Pike and Shipp lured Slemmer to the steam plant. Shadala Peterson, 18, served as lookout. Over roughly 30 minutes, Pike and Shipp beat, slashed, and stabbed Slemmer with a box cutter and miniature meat cleaver. A symbol was carved into her chest. Her clothing was removed to prevent her from fleeing. When Slemmer tried to escape, Shipp would chase her down and drag her back. Pike mocked her throughout, asking, "Do you still believe in God?" The act culminated when Pike smashed Slemmer's skull with a chunk of asphalt. In the victim's final moments, Pike leaned over and asked, "Colleen, do you know who is doing this to you?" She then reached down and plucked a piece of bone from Slemmer's skull, keeping it as a souvenir in her jacket pocket. What kind of person keeps a piece of another human being's skull in their pocket and eats breakfast with it the next morning? Back at Job Corps, Pike danced as she recounted what happened. The next morning at breakfast, she showed the skull fragment to friends, saying, "And yes, I am eating breakfast with it." Pike was convicted on March 22, 1996, after a few hours of deliberation. The jury did not need long. On March 30th, at age 20, she was sentenced to death, making her the youngest woman sentenced to death in the United States in the modern era, following the Supreme Court's 1972 reinstatement of capital punishment. Shipp received life with parole eligibility plus 25 years. Peterson received probation in exchange for her testimony. Pike spent nearly 30 years in de facto solitary confinement as the sole woman on Tennessee's death row. She was held apart from every other inmate in a section designed for her alone. In 2001, during a transfer, she attempted to strangle fellow inmate Patricia Jones with a shoestring, earning an additional 25-year sentence. Even inside prison, she could not stop. In 2012, an elaborate escape plot involving a New Jersey personal trainer who had developed a romantic correspondence with Pike and a corrupt corrections officer was thwarted before it could be executed. She spent 3 decades behind bars and never once showed evidence of rehabilitation. On September 30th, 2025, the Tennessee Supreme Court issued a death warrant scheduling Pike's execution for September 30th, 2026. If carried out, she would be the first woman executed in Tennessee in over 200 years. She has filed a legal challenge to the state's injection protocol, citing a rare blood condition and religious beliefs. As of March 2026, no ruling has been issued. Shipp's parole was denied in October of 2025, with review set for 2031. That case may end with the first female execution in Tennessee in 2 centuries. But the next one would involve a family friend who spent a year planning to take a mother and her daughters, all because of his fixation on a 12-year-old. Joanne Bain and Adrienne Bain. In the early hours of April 27, 2012, a man entered a home in Whiteville, Tennessee, with a key. He lured the mother, Joanne Bain, to a detached garage by claiming one of the children was sleepwalking. He strangled her with a rope fitted with PVC pipe handles. He then returned to the house and suffocated 14-year-old Adrienne. He drove away with the 2 surviving daughters, his wife, and the 2 bodies. A 2-hour drive during which only a row of seats separated the living girls from their deceased mother and sister. Joanne Bain was 31 years old, a mother of 3 daughters, Adrienne, Alexandria, who was 12, and Kylia, who was 8. The family lived in Whiteville, a small community in Hardmon County of about 4,700 people. They were planning to move to Arizona at the end of the school year. Adam Christopher Mays, 35, was connected to the family through his eldest sister, Pamela, who had been married to the girl's father, Gary Bain, for 20 years before their 2002 divorce. After the divorce, Mays maintained a close friendship with Gary and was described as like an uncle to the girls, who regularly watched them and took them on outings. He was trusted. He had access to the home. He had a key. The family had no reason to suspect that the man who babysat their daughters was planning something that had been building for over a year. According to his wife Teresa's statement to the TBI, Mays had planned the act for over a year due to his obsessive fixation on 12-year-old Alexandria. He described her as his new love and said they were going to be together. Teresa stated she had seen Mays behave inappropriately with Alexandria on multiple occasions. He sold his motorcycle to finance the plan and intended to give the girls new identities and flee across the border to Mexico, where he believed he could disappear with them permanently. The plan was not impulsive. It was funded, structured, and rehearsed. How does a man described as like an uncle spend a year planning to take a mother's life so he can take her 12-year-old daughter? And nobody around him sees it coming. After 2 failed attempts on April 25th and 26th, Mays attempted to incapacitate Gary Bain with cocktails laced with eye drops, prescription medication, and sedatives. He wanted Gary unconscious or gone before he entered the house. Gary drank the cocktails, but survived. In the early hours of April 27th, Mays carried out the plan using the key he had always been trusted with. He buried Joanne and Adrienne in a shallow grave behind his parents' Mississippi home, just feet from the back door. The bodies were recovered May 5th after investigators received information from Teresa. On May 9th, Mays was added to the FBI 10 Most Wanted list, replacing Whitey Bulger. The next day, law enforcement officers found him lying face down in dense woods behind a church in Blue Springs, Mississippi, 1.5 miles from his home, with the 2 surviving girls huddled beside him. They had been in the woods for days. When ordered to surrender, he raised a pistol and took his own life in front of the children. The 2 girls, dehydrated, covered in poison ivy, without food or water for 3 days, were unable to speak when rescuers reached them. Alexandria, the 12-year-old whose fixation had driven the entire plan, told her younger sister once they were safe, "Now we can go home." Teresa Mays pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree charges and received 35 years. Mary Mays, Adam's mother, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of especially aggravated taking and received 13.5 years. The plea deals were pursued at Gary Bain's request, so his surviving daughters would never have to sit in a witness chair and describe what happened to them. Mays's body, refused by all family members, was donated to the University of Tennessee's Body Farm for forensic research. Even in death, nobody wanted him. That case ended with a rescue in the woods and a man on the FBI's Most Wanted list. But the next one would involve a family of Jehovah's Witnesses, a chance encounter at a rest stop, and a 2-year-old boy who was shot twice and somehow survived. The Little Lid Murders. On April 6, 1997, a family of 4 stopped at a rest area on Interstate 81 near Baileyton, Tennessee, on their way home from a Jehovah's Witness convention. Vidar Lillelid, 34, born in Bergen, Norway, was known for enthusiastically sharing his faith with strangers. His wife Delphina, 28, was a first-generation Honduran American. They had 2 children, Tabitha, who was 6, and Peter, who was 2. They had moved from Miami to Powell, Tennessee, seeking safety. 6 troubled teenagers from Pikeville, Kentucky, were already at the rest area. They were fleeing property damage from a motel party and heading to New Orleans in a battered Chevrolet Citation that was barely running, with 2 handguns between them. They had discussed carjacking a better vehicle. Their car was failing and they needed a way out. Their central figure was Natasha Cornett, 18, diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a school dropout raised in poverty who had cultivated an image of darkness and rebellion. The others? Dean Mullins, 19, Joseph Risner, 20, Crystal Sturgill, 18, Karen Howell, 17, and Jason Bryant, 14, the youngest, with an IQ of 85 and emotional skills far below his age, who had been using alcohol since age 3. Bryant had met Cornett just weeks before. He was the youngest person in the group and the one least equipped to understand the gravity of what was about to happen. Vidar approached the group to share his faith. It was something he did naturally, something his family expected him to do. Risner displayed a weapon and told the family they would have to come with them for their van. The family was forced into their Dodge van at gunpoint and driven to Payne Hollow Lane, a secluded gravel road in Greene County. During the drive, 6-year-old Tabitha offered chocolates to her captors. She reached into a bag and held them out to the people who had just taken her family, at gunpoint. She did not understand what was happening. She was 6 years old, and she was being kind. What does it say about the nature of innocence that a child offered sweets to the people who were about to take everything from her? If you have made it this far and enjoy content like this, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps more than you think and keeps us bringing you stories like these. At the road, the family was lined up in a ditch and shot. Vidar received 6 gunshot wounds. Delphina suffered 8 and may have been conscious for up to 25 minutes after being shot, including when the van drove over her body as the group fled the scene. Tabitha, shot once in the head, was pronounced brain dead at the hospital. Her organs were donated, saving other lives even as hers ended. 2-year-old Peter was shot twice, once behind his right ear and once in the back. The bullets should have ended his life. Against all medical expectations, he survived, though he lost his right eye and suffered permanent neurological and spinal injuries that would shape the rest of his life. The 6 fled toward Mexico in the Lila Lid van, were denied entry at the border, and were captured by Border Patrol in Arizona 2 days later. They had made it across multiple states before being stopped. All 6 pleaded guilty on March 13, 1998, in exchange for the maximum penalty being taken off the table. Each received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole plus 25 years. The plea deals meant no trial, no testimony, and no public airing of exactly who did what during those final minutes on Payne Hollow Lane. Peter Lillelid was raised in Sweden by his paternal aunt, far from Tennessee in the country where his family was destroyed. He completed IT education, married his wife Caitlin in 2020, and now lives in Connecticut. As of 2025, he is approximately 30 years old. He has said he has always known about what happened to his family, but chooses to look forward rather than back, describing his life as ordinary. The word ordinary, coming from a man who was shot twice before his 3rd birthday and lost his parents and sister in a roadside ditch, carries a weight that is difficult to measure. All 6 perpetrators remain incarcerated in Tennessee state prisons. Legal challenges continue. The Supreme Court's rulings on juvenile life without parole sentences make Bryant and Howell potentially eligible for resentencing given their ages at the time. However, in December of 2023, a circuit court denied Howell's bid for a parole hearing, and in November of 2024, the Tennessee Supreme Court denied her appeal. All 6 remain behind bars as of 2026. nearly 3 decades after a chance encounter at a rest stop ended a family. That case saw a 2-year-old boy shot twice and survived to build an ordinary life in Connecticut. But the next one would go unsolved for 8 years, until a jealous wife sent anonymous letters to her husband's mistress. The Signal Mountain Murders. On July 9, 1988, 3 men set out on ATVs to ride to the Blue Hole, a popular swimming spot on Signal Mountain near Chattanooga. Richard Mason, 49, his son-in-law Kenneth Griffith, 22, an airman first class at Eglin Air Force Base, and Griffith's squadron mate Earl Smock, 23, a USAF sergeant, departed around 6 that evening. They never returned. Frank E. Castile, approximately 40, had recently purchased 130 acres on Signal Mountain near the Blue Hole. He was not from the area originally and had no deep roots in the community. What he had was land, a temper, and a growing obsession with trespassers. He was deeply frustrated by people crossing his property, particularly ATV riders who tore through the trails without permission. He had consulted the local sheriff about the problem multiple times, and the sheriff had advised him to post signs and call the authorities. Castile had a different approach in mind. 18 witnesses later testified to confrontational encounters where Castile approached trespassers carrying a shotgun, threatened them verbally, and on multiple occasions declared that he would have to start shooting people if they did not stay off his property. He was not making idle threats. He was building towards something. He was specifically annoyed by a trespasser he knew by name, Mason. Between 6 and 8 that evening, neighbors heard rapid gunfire echoing across the mountain. The shots came in clusters, suggesting multiple rounds fired in quick succession. Griffith was shot in the side of the head. Mason was shot in the chest. Smock, who attempted to flee on foot when the shooting began, was first hit in the shoulder with birdshot at range, then fatally struck through the heart with buckshot as he tried to get away. 3 men. 3 different locations on the property. 3 different wound patterns. The person responsible then meticulously cleaned the scene, removing shell casings and blood evidence, wrapped the bodies in a blue tarp, loaded the ATVs onto a vehicle, dumped them at one illegal dump site, and transported the bodies to a separate location 11 to 14 miles away. The level of cleanup suggested someone who was methodical, physically strong, and in no rush. He had the entire mountain to himself. The case went completely cold for 8 years. No forensic evidence survived the cleanup. No witnesses saw the act itself. No confession was made. The families of the 3 men searched for answers and found nothing. The investigation stalled and showed no signs of progress. Mason's family, Griffith's young wife, Smock's Air Force colleagues, all were left without closure for nearly a decade. How does a triple incident on a mountain go unsolved for 8 years and then get cracked open by a jealous wife's anonymous letters to another woman? The break came not through detective work, but through marital rage. In 1996, 8 years after the incident, Castile began an affair with a woman named Marie Hill. His wife, Susie Castile, enraged not by the crimes, but by the infidelity, sent anonymous letters to Hill accusing Frank of the 3 incidents on Signal Mountain. She included newspaper clippings about the disappearances, providing details that only someone with inside knowledge would possess. Hill, understandably alarmed, went directly to police. Investigators wired her home and recorded a 5-hour confrontation between Susie and Frank, during which Susie said she was dragged down to the police station and fingerprinted because of what Frank had done. The recording captured not a confession from Frank, but an accusation from Susie that was detailed enough to reopen everything. Castile was arrested April 15, 1997, nearly 9 years after the three men disappeared. He was convicted in May of 1998, but the conviction was overturned on appeal because the recorded conversation between Susie and Frank was deemed too prejudicial for the jury to hear. The case had to be retried. At his second trial in May of 2003, even without the tape, the jury convicted him in under 2 hours based on the testimony of 18 witnesses who described the same pattern. A man with a shotgun who promised he would start shooting. He was sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms. Frank Castile passed away in prison on May 25, 2019, at age 71, maintaining his innocence to the end. His son published a book in 2020 arguing wrongful conviction. The families of the 3 victims have never publicly commented on the book. The case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, City Confidential, and the Crime Junkie podcast. The Blue Hole is still there, still on Signal Mountain, still a place where people go swimming on hot days. 3 men rode ATVs toward it on a July evening in 1988 and never came back. That case was solved by a wife who could not keep her husband's secret when he stopped keeping their marriage sacred. But the next one would involve a woman who was set on fire inside her own car, survived for 36 hours, and identified her attacker from the burn unit before she passed. Tracy Crozier. On the night of April 16th through 17th, 1991, a 22-year-old Chattanooga woman was sitting in her car when the man she had recently left climbed inside to talk. He tried to convince her to come back. She refused. She told him to turn himself in to police. When she laughed at the suggestion, he told her to get out because he was going to burn the car. Then he grabbed her keys and threw them out the window so she could not escape. He retrieved a container of gasoline he had prepared earlier at a gas station, lit the fuse, and threw it through the driver's side window. Tracy Latrice Crozier was described by friends as such a sweet, caring girl who would do anything for anybody. She had been in a relationship with Leroy Hall Jr. since January of 1986. The relationship was volatile, and on March 26, 1991, Crozier moved out to live with her grandmother. Hall, 24, was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and emotional immaturity, with a documented history of using fire to express distress. Fire was not new to him. It was his language. It was how he communicated when words failed and control slipped. After the breakup, he repeatedly called Crozier's grandmother's house late at night, sometimes multiple times in a single evening, and told her Uncle Chris, "If I cannot have her, nobody can." The statement was not ambiguous. It was a declaration of what he intended to do. On April 6th, 11 days before the final act, he set her car on fire while it was parked outside her grandmother's home. Her uncle fired a warning shot to chase him off. The warning was not enough. Hall was not deterred by a gunshot. He was escalating. Each act was larger than the last, and nobody was able to stop the trajectory. On the night of the incident, after consuming roughly 2.5 cases of beer, Hall stopped at a gas station where he filled a tea jug with gasoline, purchased a cigarette lighter, and stuffed paper towels into the jug to serve as a fuse. He assembled the device deliberately, step by step, at a gas station counter. He found Crozier sitting in her car. He entered, talked, tried to convince her to take him back, and was rejected. She told him to turn himself in to police for the previous car fire. When she laughed at the suggestion, he told her to get out because he was going to burn the car. Then he grabbed her keys from the ignition and threw them out the window so she could not start the engine and drive away. He trapped her inside. He retrieved the gasoline container, lit the paper towel fuse, and threw the burning jug through the driver's side window with her still in the seat. Neighbors described seeing a ball of fire exploding in the street. The explosion was visible from blocks away. How does a woman survive burns covering 95% of her body, remain conscious, identify her attacker by name, and hold on for 36 hours before the injuries take her? Despite burns covering 95% of her body, with only the soles of her feet unburned, Crozier remained conscious. She identified Hall as her attacker to neighbors and first responders at the scene. She survived in agonizing pain for approximately 36 hours before passing on April 18th. The attending physician called it the worst burn case they had ever seen. Crozier's identification of Hall from the burn unit was devastating testimony that no defense could overcome. Hall was convicted of premeditated first-degree taking in March of 1992 and sentenced to the maximum penalty. While awaiting his sentence to be carried out, he lost his eyesight due to improperly treated glaucoma, becoming one of the few blind individuals facing that outcome in American history. After 28 years of appeals, delays, and last-minute legal challenges, including a 2019 revelation that a juror had concealed a personal history during selection, Hall's sentence was carried out by electric chair on December 5, 2019, at Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. He was 53. His last words, "People can learn forgiveness and love and can make this world a better place." Crozier's sister Stacy Wooten said afterward, "I have had the best sleep I have had in 28 years." That case ended with an execution 28 years after the crime. But the final case on this list involves a man who was fired from a restaurant and then spent 67 days systematically targeting fast food workers across Nashville. The fast food killer. Between February 16th and April 23rd, 1997, 7 people were taken from fast food restaurants across the Nashville area in a 67-day span. The person responsible had been fired from his job at a Shoney's restaurant the day before his first act. He used a false name that kept him invisible to investigators, even after they identified him from a composite sketch. Paul Dennis Reed Jr. was born November 12, 1957, in Richland Hills, Texas. After setting his grandmother's bed on fire with her still in it as a child, he was sent to a boys' home. Medical evaluations diagnosed brain dysfunction linked to 4 childhood head injuries. By 16, he was a full-time criminal. In 1984, he was sentenced to 20 years for robbing 4 restaurants, but served only 7 before parole. After release, he used a settlement to get cosmetic procedures and demo tapes, moving to Nashville in 1995 under the alias Justin Parks to pursue a country music career. Investigators later said he had the look but zero talent. He took a job as a cook at Shoney's and was fired on February 15, 1997, the day before everything began. On February 16th, at a Captain D's in Donaldson, Reed knocked on the door pretending to apply for a job. He robbed the restaurant, forced 2 employees into the walk-in cooler, and shot both in the back of the head. He took $7,000 and used it as a down payment on a car 2 days later. On March 23rd, at a McDonald's in Hermitage, Reed forced 4 employees back inside after closing time, had the manager open the safe, then lined them up face down in the storeroom and shot 3 of them. When his weapon jammed on the 4th employee, Jose Antonio Ramirez Gonzalez, Gonzalez fought back despite having just watched 3 of his co-workers get shot beside him. Reed stabbed him 17 times. Gonzalez, bleeding from 17 wounds, played dead on the floor until Reed left the building. Then he crawled across the storeroom, reached a phone, and called for help. He survived. His testimony at trial would become the single most important piece of evidence in the prosecution's case. Without Gonzalez's survival, the McDonald's incident would have had no living witness, and the connection to the Captain D's incident might never have been established. On April 23rd, at a Baskin-Robbins in Clarksville, Reed took 2 employees, drove them to Dunbar Cave State Park, and harmed them fatally. How does a man get identified from a composite sketch at his former workplace, give a false name that checks out clean, and then go on to take 5 more lives while investigators move on? After the Captain D's incident, investigators actually visited Shoney's with a composite sketch. Co-workers identified Reed. But because he was using the alias Justin Parks, a background check came back clean. The investigation was dropped. Reed went on to carry out 2 more attacks over the next 2 months. The alias saved him. 5 more people paid the price. The break came on June 1st, 1997, when Reed went to the home of his former Shoney's manager, Mitchell Roberts, with a weapon, demanding Roberts come with him. Roberts barricaded his family inside. When Reed called back to apologize, Roberts, on police instruction, convinced him to return. Officers were waiting and arrested him. Roberts then insisted Nashville detectives consider Reed for the fast food incidents, a connection that might have prevented his release on bond. Reed was convicted in 3 separate trials and received 7 sentences of the maximum penalty, the most ever imposed on a single person in Tennessee history. He exhibited bizarre behavior throughout, claiming to be part of a government mind control project. He was never executed. On November 1st, 2013, Paul Dennis Reed passed away at age 55 from complications of pneumonia and heart failure at Nashville General Hospital. He maintained his innocence to the end. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.